Hey, what's up buddy, welcome back to another Skyblock video. Today we're going to talk about the tank class and how to build the best setup for it. Now that we're getting closer to the end of the catacombs with Master Mode 7 coming out soon, this is the perfect time to do this. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into it. We will start with the armor. For the armor, I'll be mentioning 8 different armor setups depending on what point of the game you're in. Let's start with the first armor setup, which is the heavy armor. The heavy armor has a Catacomb 2 requirement and it gives you defense, mostly as base stats, and gives you 1 walk speed for every 50 defense you have. For early game players who are just starting dungeons, this setup could be helpful as it gives you decent defense in dungeons since your stats are multiplied. However, it does have Catacomb 2 requirement, meaning you will need to use any other non-dungeonized armor setup, such as any of the dragon armor, for few runs. The second armor is Super Heavy Armor, which has a Catacomb 15 requirement. This armor is an upgraded version of the heavy armor, which clearly means that it is better. Just like the heavy armor, it gives you 1 walk speed for every 50 defense, but in addition, each piece reduces the seismic wave cooldown by 5 seconds. If you want another cheap setup that gives you okay defense for early-mid-game dungeons, you could possibly use this, or at least some pieces of it. Just keep in mind that it lacks HP, which will be annoying against mobs that do 2 damage. Moving on, the third armor setup is Old Armor Dungeonized, which also has a Catacomb requirement of 15. This armor is only viable when it is dungeonized, and what makes it usable is the full set bonus ability that increases your armor enchants. Overall, this setup could be used in mid-game and quite cheap to 5-star since it uses Dragon Essence. There are some videos out there that can show you some tests if you want to learn more about them. You can either use this or the legendary Super Heavy, but this is better until you reach higher floors. The fourth setup is Reaper Mask and 3-4 Necromancer Lord Armor. This setup requires floor 6 completion for the Necromancer Lord Armor and Revenant Slayer 7 to use for the Reaper Mask. However, very good late game setup up to floor 6. It has really good effective HP and not only defense, making it decent against mobs that do 2 damage. I would say the only issue that some might face is that they do not meet the requirements to use the Reaper Mask, which can be easily replaced by the other Revenant helmets. For example, like the Zombie Heart, Crystallized Heart, and the Revived Heart. And if you somehow just want to use your healer setup, the Mender Fedora also works, but make sure that there is no one in the party that's also using it, as it does not stack. Anyways, the fifth armor setup is Reaper Mask plus tier 12 Perfect Chestplate and 2-4 Necromancer Lord Armor. This is similar to the previous armor setup that we just talked about, but you replace the chestplate with something a bit cheaper, which is the tier 12 Perfect Chestplate. Since the perfect armor requires diamond essence, it's cheaper to 5-star. But the main 2 issues that this one has is, for one, it heavily focuses on defense, making it give you less effective HP. And secondly, it requires Catacomb 21 to use. This could be easily fixed by using a lower tier perfect chestplate or even just using the super heavy chestplate temporarily until upgrading to something better. The sixth armor setup is Reaper Mask with 3-4 Golder Armor. This setup gives an insane amount of effective HP and reduces damage you take from withers, which is helpful inside floor 7 boss room. Overall, it's the best armor setup, and comboing it with the Reaper Mask, you can just get good regen. Finally, the 7th armor setup. You might be wondering, if I just showed you the best setup, what else is there? Well, it is using Reaper Mask with 3-4 Wither Armor. I do know that it's obviously worth it to just upgrade from Wither to Golder because it costs only around 1.2 million coins. However, in case you cannot afford that for some reason, you have the option to use this. Just keep in mind that for some reason, the Wither leggings and the Golder leggings have the same amount of effective HP, so you can save up by upgrading it last. And that is it for the armor setups. Just remember that you're not required to use exactly what I'm showing you. You can experiment and see what fits you best. Anyways, you might be wondering, what Reforges and Ultimate Enchants should I use? Well, the answer is simple. Giant Reforge is the best Reforge for tanks. However, if you cannot afford the Giant Tooth, you can use Reinforced or even just Heavy. Now for the Ultimate Enchant, this is all about preference. You got either the Wisdom or the Legion. Last Stand would be a good option too, but it's currently bugged and just not worth it. And as for the Wisdom, use this if you care about mana and use Legion to buff your stats. I personally think Legion is better, but it's quite expensive, so you can use Legion 3 instead of going for 5. Okay, so let's move on to pets now. Finding the best pet for you can be difficult, but hopefully I'll help you decide. I will begin by mentioning all the pets and then concluding with all of them. The first pet is Turtle. Turtle pet increases your defense by a percentage of your defense and also regens your health per second slightly if you're near water. And you also get no knockback if you have the legendary one, which is useless now since tanks already are immune to it. The second pet is Jellyfish. Jellyfish pet increases your base health regen and heals people around you, just overall buffs your healing. The third pet is Baby Yeti. Baby Yeti gives strength and intelligence as base stats and has the ability to give you defense depending on your strength. And then finally, we have the Blue Whale. Blue Whale gives you a good amount of health and defense because of the ability that gives you 3 defense for every 20 health. Now that you know all of the pets, let's conclude. Firstly, Jellyfish is not mainly a tank pet because it doesn't give you anything in terms of effective HP. However, it does give you really good regen, which could be helpful in some cases. But since as a tank you need to be as tanky as possible, this pet isn't as viable. The Reaper Mask alone can give you good healing. I would say only use this pet as a last resort because it can be cheap sometimes. Secondly, the Turtle pet used to be the best pet for its good defense and immunity to knockback. But it's not as good anymore since other pets outshine it by a lot. Still okay, and if you manage to get an epic one for a cheaper price, could be helpful for mid-game. And speaking of those pets that outshine, we finally got the Baby Yeti and Blue Whale. Both are amazing effective HP pets, although Baby Yeti is mostly better for damage classes, so overall, the Blue Whale is the best pet for tanks. Should be the endgame pet you use. Let's move on to pet items. There are so many pet items and honestly, it always comes down to preference. But here are the ones I recommend. Spooky Cupcake for an additional 30 strength and 20 speed, Tiger Plushie for 35 attack speed, and I guess if you really want to go all out, you got the Hardened Scale or Reinforced Scale for more defense. You don't have to worry about getting a Turtle Shelmet because of the tank's passive ability that makes you immune to knockback. Alright, so let's talk about the weapons now. The weapons we'll be mentioning are Earth Shard, Flower Truth, Livid Dagger, Shadow Fury, Giant Sword, Astrea, Scylla, Terminator, and Juju Shortbow. The first weapon is Earth Shard, which has a Catacomb 19 requirement. This weapon reduces the cooldown of the Seismic Wave and gives okay defense, but the damage is not the best. The only good thing about it is the cooldown and it being cheap. Past floor 4, it should not be used at all. The second weapon is the Flower Truth. As a tank, your goal is pretty much to tank all of the damage, but while you're focusing on maxing your effective HP, clearing rooms can be tedious. Therefore, Flower Truth could be a very helpful weapon. It does decent amount of damage and it's very good for clearing with its ability to shoot a rose that ricochets between 3 enemies. The third weapon is Livid Dagger. This weapon is probably the most known weapon because of how good it is for DPS and has full attack speed. If you compare this to the Flower Truth, it does more melee damage, but the downside of the Livid Dagger is that it is worse for clearing. You can always combo both the weapons, one for clearing and then one for DPS if you want. The fourth weapon is Shadow Fury. This weapon has an ability to rapidly teleport to 5 enemies and hit them. Now this weapon has started quite a bit of a debate because it is better than Livid Dagger with single hit damage. However, Livid Dagger does more damage per second because of its attack speed. And on top of that, a Livid Dagger is a lot cheaper for its damage. If you do reforge your talismans to include attack speed, you can just use the Fury, but if you're looking for something cheaper and it's still really good, you can use the Livid Dagger. The fifth weapon is Giant Sword. This weapon is also very known because if you use with the One For All enchant, it is very good. Although it is worth over 130 million without the One For All, so with a low budget it's not really worth it. In addition, keep in mind since it cannot have any other enchants, life stealing will not be possible. The sixth weapon is Astrea. This weapon is probably the best and most known tank weapon because of its amazing damage and increases your defense. Although it's very expensive, and since you're a tank, you don't have enough mana to use the Wither Impact to clear the whole rooms. Therefore, a secondary weapon, possibly like the Terminator or the Juju Bow, could be helpful for clearing. Don't get me wrong, the Astrea is still good for clearing, but in Master Mode, it barely does any impact. The seventh weapon is Scylla. This weapon is also from the same family of the Astrea, but it doesn't give defense. Instead, mostly used for the Wither Shield it gives when comboed with the Suspicious Reforge. I wouldn't recommend using this if you are trying to go all out for tanking. Basically, only use it if you and your team is comfortable with the floor. The eighth weapon is Juju Shortbow. this is now the most used weapon in the whole game because of how broken it is for its price. It is good for clearing and can be used as secondary to the Estrella. And finally, the last weapon is, well, obviously the Terminator. If you thought the Juju was good, this is the best weapon for dungeons right now for Master Mode. Amazing for clearing and does an insane amount of damage, although it does cost 1 billion coins, so it is up to you. Anyways, that sums up the weapons. Hopefully I was able to help you decide on which one to use. Now for its Reforges though. If you are using an Estrella or a Scylla, use the Suspicious Reforge, and if you are using any of the melee weapons like Livid Dagger and Flower Truth, use Fabled. Withered also works, but Fabled is better. Next up we have the helpful items. The first and most important item is Ice Spray. This weapon is expensive, but it's actually really helpful for killing fast mobs like Shadow Assassins because it has an ability where it freezes mobs for 5 seconds, giving you time to do as much damage as possible. As a tank, your main role would be ice spraying the mini boss for your teammates to kill, so it is important to try to get this. The second item is the Wand of Atonement. This one heals you for 170 HP per second for 7 seconds. If it's too expensive, you can use the downgraded ones as well. The third item is Florid or Ornate Zombie Sword. The Florid Zombie Sword is the upgraded version of the Ornate Sword and has a good healing ability where it heals you for 168 HP plus 5% of your total health. The fourth item is Plasma Flux, Overflux or Mana Flux. The Plasma Flux is the upgraded version of the Overflux and they all give you more strength and increases your regen. The fifth item is Gloomblock, Grimoire. This item has an ability where it heals you for 40% with overflow mana. Personally, a Florid Zombie Sword is enough for me, but it is very good and recommended by a lot of people. The sixth item is the Last Breath. This can also be used as a weapon if you want, but it has an ability where it reduces the defense of the mobs, so if you use it on mini bosses after you ice spray them, you can help your team a lot when killing it. And then finally we have the last item, which is the Jingle Bell. This item is used to take aggro of all mobs in a 10 block radius, which is helpful in floor 7 boss rooms for tanks. And that's everything. I'm not going to be mentioning talisman reforges because as of right now, after the strength nerf, reforging your talisman is different for everyone as of right now, so I cannot give you an exact way to reforge them, but there are a lot of videos out there that show you how to configure your reforges, so be sure to check them out. You don't need to go for a tanky reforge, a damaged one is fine. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. This video took me so long to edit, so if you do enjoy these type of videos, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, help me reach 30,000 subs, and let me know which class you want me to do next. I will put down a poll in the description and in the top of the comment section. Be sure to vote, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.